feel free to go ahead and ask them right during the middle of Jake's presentation. He wants to keep it pretty informal, so feel free to unmute yourself at any time to ask Jake a question, or you can use the chat feature as well, and I'll interject a question in if need be. But feel free to use that. Just ask him yourself or use the chat feature. We are looking forward to hearing from Jake, and without further ado, I'm going to just go ahead and turn it over to him.
Well, for joining them this morning. Just give you a like Paul said, I want to keep it very informal. So anytime a question hits you guys, fire it right out there, and we'll just keep on moving. A little introduction. I'm Jake Reeves, Director of Instruction at Fox Den Country Club here in Knoxville. Just a little bio on me. Grew up in South Georgia, playing junior golf like most of you did probably. We had a great junior program in Georgia. Just about all my buddies went to some level of college golf, and so once I got up going through the junior ranks, I continuously got better and better, and started playing these little AJGA events, which were not so little then. There was essentially one per week throughout the country, and it was the kind of the who's who was there, the Duvals and Mickelson, and that's how old I am, first of all. And was lucky enough to win one when I was like 17 years old, and it kind of opened all the college doors to me and the recruiting process and the whole deal. So I ended up coming to Knoxville, Tennessee to play at the University of Tennessee. Still learning how to play, with the big boys. I always felt like I was a little bit of a late bloomer all the way through. Had some pretty good finishes early on in my college career, and played. I won an event in the 4 years that I was here, some top tens, whatever. Nothing great, but ended up my senior year, so I was honorable mention All-American. It was kind of on the fringe of, golly, man, should I turn pro or should I not? It was, it was kind of a toss-up, so I didn't want to face the real world yet, so I turned pro, and once again, I almost felt like I was learning to do it again, this time learning to play for money. Played 3 years, moderate success. I was able to make enough money to kind of keep going. But I always had this thing. I grew up with a crazy strong left-hand grip. So hit it a long way, got in contention a lot. And when the heat got on, wasn't always great if I didn't have my timing. So I would get in these pairings with these guys that I had heard of, seen on TV or whatever. And you would get into these tight holes, and these guys are like, man, they're like driving a Cadillac. And I get in there and I'm nervous. I just want to hit the planet. And I realized at that point I had basically plateaued and gotten as good as I was going to get. So I went back, finished school. I was like, I'm going to learn how to play from a neutral grip. I've seen too many guys do it that way, and they seem to play a lot more relaxed, stress-free golf. So it took me about 8 or 10 months to probably even shoot par again. So I didn't take any lessons. I literally learned how to get the club face back to square, which was enough because I'd done it the other way my whole life. So with that being said, after playing for another 12 years, I ran into some hip trouble and wasn't able to keep going playing-wise, so I turned to teaching. And looking back, it's amazing, really, how the grip change taught me so much about teaching and how a strong grip affects the face, how the face affects the path, and on down the road. So so that led me into teaching. And now for these presentations, seminars, man, I saw Joe Hallett on here. I applaud you, man, for being able to do these seminars. And I've never been able to wrap my head around like how we pass general information. Like the way I teach is like every person that comes in my bay, it's like I'm sizing them up and I'm asking questions, and I want to make sure that I give the right information to that individual. I just think it's hard. Like the Golf Channel's on all the time and they're trying to give you general information. I just think it's such a hard thing to do. I mean, I get round guys, skinny guys, strong grips, weak grips, underneath, over the top. I mean, I get every type of that person. So to pass general information is so hard. But it's great to do these things. And that's why I wanted to make it informal. I want you to ask questions because essentially Teaching golf is your preferences. It's the preferences that you've lived through, that you've learned, whatever it is. So that kind of leads me to, I'm going to just start. I've got 3 or 4 things I wanted to talk about. Just it's the popular stuff that people are continually arguing back and forth on social media and stuff. And I just wanted you to get my take on them. So any questions so far before we get going? All good, Paul? All right. So I want to give you my take on the grip. First of all, you see a lot of people teach it a lot of different ways. For me, growing up, crazy strong in the left hand, strong face, got to have a lot of body rotation to offset the face. But in a perfect world, here's what I try to pass to most of my players without anything crazy going on. First of all, I want them to hold this grip in these back 3 fingers and that pad sitting on top of the grip. So if I have them hold this club parallel to the ground, probably anybody that I've ever taught, I've had them do this. Parallel to the ground, thumb and forefinger off the club, you should feel like you could hold that there all day long because it's wedged in between those 3 fingers and under that fat pad. Now, the reason that I believe that's important, it does 2 things. It's specifically for slower pace players. For one, when I've got this thing in my fingers and under the pad, when I take this club back, the club face stays nice and strong, or a little bit more toe down than what we were traditionally taught of toe up. So 2 things it does. One, it keeps the club face nice and strong. And then I always ask them which end of this club is heavier, this or this. This end's obviously heavier, right? So if I've got it in my fingers and I take this club back and I've got it remotely on a good path right here, at some point that club's going to hinge on its own. Okay. So that's the 2 power points that we want to hit, and what should add some distance to your players, club players at home, the strength of the face and the automatic hinge that it gets. Like I said, these are preferences. What else it will lead to that I'm a big proponent on is once you've got it in these fingers, I love to see the club head this side of the handle. I see it every day. People come in, the club head gets behind the handle, and then they overreact from a steep plane. And that kind of leads me back to what I see when I get club players, and they may have this thing too much in their palm. Maybe the thumb runs down the shaft. Maybe it even goes over here, so they've got you faked out, but it's still in the palm. So what happens with that guy is he will essentially over-rotate the face, and then he'll never get the hinge that he needs. So he's losing power in 2 different areas. So, and the other thing I was going to tell you guys is when you're teaching, you got to have a little give. I know your preferences are strong, as are mine. I try to teach what I believe. For example, I had Peter Minotti this winter. We're trying to teach him one of my strong preferences, and I had to have some give in me, in the fact that he's always fought a high left arm and his club gets behind the handle a little bit. So we worked so hard on this, but what we found is he can do it on the practice tee, but on the golf course, as the club face gets stronger, his lead arm keeps rising. And it's just it's a hard thing for him to do. So I, as a teacher, had to have some give in me, and we let that club rotate a little more open so he could round the path out a little easier. So it's a tough balance for you to preach what you know and what you believe is right, and then also have a little give when you see, man, this guy's tendencies are so strong, or his eye direction or whatever it is just won't let these things happen. Another part of the grip that we want to talk about is the right hand. And I think not many people talk about the right hand, but you get so focused on, is my left hand too strong? Is it too weak? Is it where we need to be? The right hand. So essentially, the club rests on your right hand at the top of your backswing. If I can do this without knocking anything over. So it's going to rest on your right hand. So when you get this guy in there and he's got the grip too far under and he takes it to the top, it's resting on his right hand, he's got that shut face. The other guy is the weak left-hand guy. Normally we'll have a weak right-hand guy. When he takes it to the top, that club faces, the shaft rested on his right hand, and you can see that face has gotten a little too open. So just understanding those preferences and using your knowledge to have them best fit your player that you're teaching distinctly. Let's see, certain players, different grips. I get this question a lot. Overlap, interlock, 10 finger. To me, there's no magic answers. It's, once again, there's preferences. These kids that come 10, 11 and under, I try to encourage them a 10 finger grip just to get all the hands on there they can to get the speed and the power for them. Historically, small hands that need some help with the right forearm, I would encourage interlock. Overlap for those guys who have a tendency to want to overpower with their right forearm. I think the overlap allows the left arm to work a little better and helps them get to the inside a little bit better. The next thing I wanted to talk about is foot direction. I've done some videos on this, and I think it's really important. You see a lot of your players, I'm sure if you're like me, you see a lot of them with not enough turn behind it, and they really try to find the speed on the downswing. Probably 85% of my club players don't do enough going back and try to overcompensate for it going forward. They lose their post-up position. They get a little loose through the hip, whatever. So a lot of those I'll see, they set up this way. They'll lead this flare. They'll flare that lead toe out a little bit. This guy will be somewhat square. And I usually ask them, why do you flare the toe out? And usually see them beam up with confidence because they're like, heck yeah, man, I know this answer. I flare that toe out because it helps me clear out of the way a lot better, which is true. So then I ask them, okay, if it makes it easier to clear out of the way this way, what's it doing for us this way? This guy is essentially running a break for you getting behind the ball. So what I try to encourage those guys to do a lot of times is get this guy, square him up a little bit better, get a little relief to this toe. Now you can encourage a little deeper turn and a little better post up on the lead side as well. So I like to tell them to try to work harder in the backswing. Then you just almost can pull the pin out and let the air out in the downswing. If you create all this retention going back, then you can just let the air out of it, and you end up getting more speed that way.
Hey, Jake.
Yes.
We had a question come through from Kevin Walker. Do you have a preference between interlocking or overlap, and why?
Well, if I had a guy, or we'll say a girl with smaller hands, I would probably prefer interlock because we need to get some power out of that right hand. I think the interlock allows the right forearm to do a little more. If I had a over-the-top guy, big hands, then I definitely would I would have him try to overlap to try to allow the left arm to do more, because obviously if the left arm's working more, it's trying to pull from underneath. Good story. It's a good story. I'm glad you asked questions because it gets my brain working even more, which is scary. Cole Cottom, big baseball player. Played at Kentucky. Didn't hold that against him. I still let him in the Bay. Super fast. He's brother of Kyle Cottom, who is plays at Clemson. So Cole, he came into my Bay, and he was swinging so fast that I told him he was hitting it higher than he was far, which could have been accurate. And he was this guy we just talked about. Of course, he played baseball, so he's got the thing in his palm. He was weak left-hand guy and just hammer for everything he's worth with his right hand. And so he was already overlapping, so I got his grip a little stronger, the normal stuff, try to get him to lay the shaft down behind him, get it to exit right, all the normal stuff. He could do it some, and when he did it real well, he would hammer it to the left. So I kind of got him to double overlap a few, which even took that one step further. And then I actually got him to claw it with his right hand. So that point being made is all I was doing was try to just absolutely take every bit of power out of his right hand that I could, because that's where he was getting 80% of it. and which was causing him to get steep. The face was open. He's hitting it straight up in the air. So great question. And like I said, those are my preferences, and I think they make sense. If you want to try to get the right hand more involved, I would 10 finger or interlock. If you're trying to get some of the right hand out, which I think is what most of us find, then I would probably go or prefer overlap. Let's see, where were we? Foot direction. Okay, the pivot. This is man, this is a good one because everybody's on the strong side of the pivot. You know, are we gonna keep the flex in the right leg? That one's not very cool anymore. Now everybody wants to release the trail leg and the right hip behind you. And I've asked a lot of instructors this because, let's see, when I was coming along, it was early 90s. I spent all my time at Sea Island and saw all those guys down there. And at this time, they were teaching resistance in the lower half. So I played most all my golf from about right there. So, man, you could make an argument. I know you've heard them talk about the guys that are always hurt, Jason Day, these guys that resist, and the guys who are never hurt, Mickelson, Bubba, they're releasing the heck out of their trail leg. Well, I've had 3 surgeries, so I could make the same argument. So as I've progressed and gotten older and play less, that to me, the most important thing that you can do is get your upper body behind the ball. I don't know how many teachers would argue that, but I wouldn't think many. The most important thing is that you get your upper body turned behind the ball. To me, in a perfect world, for a 20-year-old guy who works out every day, he would maintain the flex in that right leg. But we're not robots, and we've got to have some give. So if I see people that I'm teaching and they're struggling and maybe they only get to 70 degrees back or whatever, then I'm telling them to lose some flex in the right leg, try to get the right hip to get behind them, which is going to pull the handle more behind them. I am all in favor of that. I'm just saying it's not a cookie cutter thing. I think it depends on somebody's ability, their build, their everything. So you just have to be smart enough to diagnose that person and realize how much can this guy do to get behind it. If he's not, and I always call it the Jake break, but if this guy ain't moving and this guy's not flexing and this upper half's not getting behind, I'm like, we got to take the brake off here and get the right leg to lose some flex, let the hip get behind you, let the handle get behind you, to almost let the lower body free up the upper body. So that's kind of my take on it. I'm not on a huge stance of either side of it. I think you can do it a lot of different ways. It takes a special talent and ability for a guy to turn behind it and keep all that flex in his right leg. Not saying he can't do that, but it's a tough thing, especially at, I don't know how old you guys are, but I'm about to be 50 and I'm not doing that. Last thing I want to hit on, probably my top 2 least favorite things I ever hear is, man, I got to keep my head down. Every member I have out there, every time they hit a bad shot, I didn't keep my head down. So I had a kid, I don't know, you probably heard of him, Ryan Hall. He's as good a junior as I have. I think he's the best one in the state right now. But he came to me, and I've shown a few people this still video. So everybody that gets so consumed with keeping their head down, the part that I don't love about that, there's a few that I don't love about that, but when your head is staying down, if you can see that club, yeah, there you go. So when I keep my head down, that club's coming out for the most part toe down and flipped. So the more I keep my head down, the more I'm having to rely on the timing of that club head being square at the bottom. So I almost have them do some drills where I don't have a golf ball up here, but if I'm hitting a golf ball that's right where my club head is, I'll sit another golf ball almost 2 feet out in front of it, and I'll have them hit some little 8 and 9 irons, and I'll have them try to feel like they're looking at the other ball as they're making contact with this ball. And all it does is it gets your body to open up a little more and gets the club face to work through there much more square for a longer amount of time. rather than head down, toe flipped over. So those are kind of my parts that I like to hit during a lesson. And I mean, we could go for days and days and days on stuff that I see. But anyway, if you guys have any questions, I'd love to hear them. We'll open up for a lot more discussion on whatever you guys want to talk about. So if we don't have any questions, Paul, any questions?
And but yeah, feel free if you have any questions. Grip, keeping your head down, anything that Jake has talked about so far, feel free to chime in here. Yep, Kevin Walker just had one. What technology do you use?
We have TrackMan at our facility. I don't use it a lot. Man, it just depends on what we're working on, but I don't like to use it a lot. I feel like most of the kids that I teach, they'll get too consumed with it. If there's a certain number or something we're trying to get or do, then I'll put it on there, but I don't set it up for every lesson just to read the numbers. I use it maybe, gosh, 1 out of 30 lessons.
Hey, Jake, I have a question. Steve Wagner here.
Yes.
Maybe going back to the grip, is there something particular that you do or that you would suggest, maybe even as far as a drill within the grip that would help somebody who's flipping a lot?
Well, that's a good question. And I think what I see most of the time, Steve, is I think people flip out of necessity, right? So if you get this grip and it's in their fingers and it's under the pad, so that face is going to be a lot stronger. They're going to flip it about 6 or 8 times, and then they're going to realize, man, that thing is hooking. So then you have to be there to let them know, all right, now I've got stronger grip, so I've got the face is a lot stronger, much stronger. So now I'm going to have to get my body to rotate a little sooner in the process to offset the face. If that makes sense. But as far as drill goes, I mean, I love them to sit there and hold it parallel to the ground. Like I do it all day teaching. I'm standing there. I usually got a club in my hand, and it's essentially training it where to go and strengthening the forearms and your hand muscles as well. So almost like I'm doing now, I'll hold this thing with no forefinger, no thumb, kind of just strengthening your forearm and training it where to go.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Anybody have any other questions for Jake here today?
Man, I must have been really thorough, Paul.
I know, right? Chris Woods. I feel like Chris Woods is on the call. I feel like he has to have some questions, right?
I've already covered all his content. We've talked about his hand path, the depth in his turn. We already hit on all his, I can assure you. He was probably sitting over there and go, yep, already know that. Yep, already know that.
Does anybody have any other topics or anything that you all would like to discuss here today?
I'll talk to you a little bit about, I hate to keep bringing Peter into this, but Peter talks about all the time he'll have a little white chalkboard or whatever to stuff to work on. And he's always trying to he'll always say, I want to get 1% better every week. So the hardest thing I think for us teaching our members and outside people is that when they come to a lesson, and in my mind, it's great if they can start hitting it better within that hour, which they probably are going to hit a little better within that hour. But the important thing is that they take what you gave them and be able to apply it once they leave. And that's the beauty that I've gotten 2 texts this morning from guys that I had lessons 2 weeks ago with, and they said, man, I'm doing this, I'm finally hitting this draw or whatever. So giving them the right stuff to take with them and making sure they know what to work on once they leave your bay, I think is a really important thing. And just make sure that they don't ever leave you confused. You know what I mean? Make sure that they've got a full grasp of what they're trying to do once they leave you. So once they go practicing on their own, they're working on the right things and not digging in deeper to something that you'll have to undo later.
Jake, we did have a few more come through. First one is more of a comment from Joe Hallett. Jake, great job. You taught us that our preferences are what we live through, which means our wisdom is what we failed at. And
that's
laughter.
Right. Yeah, and I tell everybody, it's like, and Joe is like, man, you talking about, we're blessed to have Joe in our state. Crazy smart guy. We're able to walk. I don't know if Joe remembers. I had a girl, Erica Popson, played with Stacy at Pinehurst at the Women's Open, and we were able to walk and talk a little bit. Just a very unassuming guy. Tons of knowledge Joe has, and I have people all the time ask me, how do you know what to teach or what do you teach? And I'm like, if you haven't lived through it or spent some time with the top teachers in the world, then you got to get it somewhere. You know what I mean? So I try not to teach something that I haven't personally lived through or seen with my own eyes. So I feel like if I do that, I'm never guessing. I don't ever want to guess when I'm with a student. I want to make sure that I've been through what they're going through. And if I was that person, how would I fix it?
And then Joe did have an actual question, particularly what is your criteria for allowing in their preference over yours? Ball flight, shot shape, contact reliability under pressure, etc.
Yeah, great question. And it's easier for me to give preferences to somebody who is at a higher level. But probably the top thing that I want to know when they come in is which way do they like to see the ball curve? To me, that's instinctive for them. So that's usually the first thing I'll ask them is which way do they want the ball to curve? And then I'll work up from there with grip, alignment, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, man, that's a great question. It kind of depends on the success they've had doing what they're doing or trying to do, or if they've tried to cut it for 3 years and it's the worst they've ever played, then I'm gonna have my preferences take over at that point. So a lot of it probably is the success that they've had doing what they're trying to do. But yeah, it's a great question. That's where you just have to use your experience and your belief in that student. And I think that's part of through all the years of teaching is being able to read that person and realize how much they can do and just go from there. But yeah, I'll definitely give more preferences to somebody who's been and done some stuff rather than just somebody who's just getting started in the game. But even that person, I still want to know which way they like to curve the ball. I have people all the time. I'll come in the bay and they'll say, and I say, where do you like to aim this? And they'll go, well, I always aim right because I hook it. And I'm like, well, first of all, you don't aim right because you hook it. You hook it because you aim right. So those kind of things are what I'll bounce back and forth. But that's a great question, and that's where you just have to use your knowledge of kind of how much that guy or girl has done before and work from there. Or that's the way I do it.
Next one comes from Paul Brannon. How often do you teach playing lessons, and what do you cover?
I don't get a chance to do a lot. I do get them out on the course some. I normally cover it. It's amazing. Like if you guys teach juniors, I'm not throwing a shot at them, but man, it is amazing. Some of the times that what we take for granted, they don't know yet. I mean, I'm talking D1 college players even. So I try to talk to them essentially when we're on a golf course. It's like gambling. If I've got a 400-yard par 4 and there's a bunker on the right at golly, testing my math skills here. Say there's one that starts at 260 and one that starts at 280. Am I buffering to the left? You know, is my miss to the left and I'm trying to hit something short of the 280, or am I trying to hit it, split both of these bunkers to get it to whatever, 120 yards rather than 150 yards? But those are the main things I'll talk to them about is risk reward. How much do you want to take on? Because I see college and high school players, they try to take on everything and it makes no sense whatsoever. So just mainly about playing around trouble and taking trouble out of the equation altogether. Hit a club that won't get you to the trouble, so to speak. So that's most of the stuff I cover. And then we'll get out and depending on how much time they have, I love to talk about the grain pitching. Kids don't understand grain and how much it can affect the wedge. Show them some different techniques. How to keep the leading edge out of the grain a little bit better. You know, you don't always have to go high. I teach them how to, you know, we can play along the ground a little bit too. You don't always have to go high, but they see it on TV. They love to go high. But basically telling them before you play every pitch, the most important thing you're going to do is read the lie, because it's going to dictate everything that you try to do with that pitch. So kind of the grain around the greens, and then, you know, the distances playing around the bunkers is essentially what I try to do the most of.
And feeding off of that, I'm going to skip a couple questions and go down to the one that Joe Hallett had again. Your grip for short game, what's your preference?
Kind of neutral. I mean, I tend to it goes back to the lie. I know you see a lot. I know Joe's seen a lot too on tour. When you get a lot of these high roughs that get right up along the green, a lot of times all these guys are going to hold the club open, but you may even see them with a little stronger left-hand grip with a more open face, just for the simple fact that they want to hold the face open. But I would say, Joe, in general, like a normal pitch, I would think the left hand is fractionally weaker, only based on the fact that I like them to have the shaft standing up a little more, because I don't want to see them hit a pitch with the toe in the air. I just think it makes the heel want to grab too much and the leading edge grab too much. So as that shaft goes a little more vertical, I think it's going to automatically get a little weaker in the left hand. And I don't hate hitting pitches with a little more right hand. I mean, I kind of encourage about 60-40 in a pitch with the right hand, just to get the club head going past the hand a little bit, rather than pulling that thing with the left hand and getting the leading edge in. So I would say a little weaker in the left hand on normal pitches, based on the fact that you're standing the shaft up a little bit. But I would think it would be close to the same, but I would have to say a little weaker in a normal pitch, high rough, probably a little stronger with the open face.
Next question comes from Patty. I appreciate your talk about the grip. I focus on it a lot. Do you have any advice on getting a student with a horrible grip to relax and trust you through a grip change?
With a what grip? I'm sorry.
With a grip change, just changing their grip from what they're constantly have to something that's maybe more neutral or something along those lines.
Yeah. If it's a weak, here's a great thing that I've researched a little bit, because I lived through it myself when I was going from that strong grip to more of a neutral grip. I don't know if the question was if they were going from weak to strong, but if they were going weak to strong, sometimes I'm gonna get in here so you can see it pretty good. So if my left hand is on there a little bit weak, now I want you to see how you see my left elbow is kind of tucked in there to my rib cage. So I've covered this a lot. So when my arms are hanging here, naturally, you can see how my hands hang, right? They don't hang this way, they hang this way. So when I'm taking this grip, now that elbow is more into my rib cage. So when it's more into my rib cage and I take this club back, my arm's trying to find its original position. And when it does, it's going to fan the club face more open. So for somebody trying to get a little stronger in the left hand, I almost will encourage them to get that left elbow a little more down range. And sometimes it'll even bring a little bow in there, which if you'll experiment with this, you see people just forced straight left arm, but that can get some tension in there, which is not great. So if I get this elbow and I just rotate it this way a little bit, all of a sudden my whole left arm gets softer and it's more in its original position than that. So left hand grip gets the left elbow in the rib cage a little bit. So don't be afraid to let them get this arm to hang a little more naturally. So elbows down range a little bit more. It'll also make it easier to get the left hand a little more on top if that's the direction they're headed.
Next is just Kevin Walker comment on course instruction, just kind of a little bit further, maybe a little bit more detail on what you do on course if you take any of your students out there for different lies, etc. I'm sure.
Yeah. If you get guys who are big drawers, I teach them to, if you go to the left side of the left side of the tee box, it opens up the hole a lot more, or cutters go to the right, just to help frame the hole a little bit better for you. And obviously we talk about downhill lies. If you're playing from downhill, the face is going to be a lot stronger, so it's going to come out hotter. So you take maybe a half club or a club less. Vice versa, going uphill, you get your body to run with the heel. If you're going up the hill, you're adding loft on the club, so you're probably going to want to take half a club to a club more. So just uneven lies. You teach them not to have their, don't have their body fight the heel, but have it go with the heel, and just have them know that the slope is going to affect the club face and how it comes into the ball.
Last question we currently have is coming from Braxton. What's the biggest thing that you've learned from working with Peter?
That my attitude stinks. No, man, he's just he's such a disciplined guy. I mean, he makes his list every day and he goes through it. Doesn't defer from it. If I could ever say any negative, sometimes when we try to implement something, if it isn't jamming in about 3 days, we'll kind of look at a little different avenue to get what we're trying to get out of. But we've made a commitment this year to shorten up and tighten up his backswing, and we're able to keep his speed. So we're making some good changes during this crazy time. But man, just his positive attitude. You can't. I try to get him literally in front of every junior I teach. And it's got nothing to do with his mechanics or his ball striking. I just hope his mentality and his outlook will reflect on these kids. I took him out with Shelby Lyford. We went out a couple of weeks ago, and I just want her to be able to soak in what she can see him do. Just positive, man. He is not a bellyacher. He's never going to complain. He's just going to keep pressing forward, and it's almost like it's contagious, just his positive outlook is contagious to the kids. And I try to use him and get him in front of these kids to help them along too. But great question, Braxton.
The last question that we had of what came through there. Does anybody have anything else like to, after those questions were asked, that like to discuss or anything along those lines? Kevin Walker just said, awesome job. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Well, if nobody has any other questions, definitely want to thank Jake as well. Really appreciate everything that you discussed. I also want to, since we do have Joe Hallett on the call here, I want to kind of just, you have anything that you want to talk about for your presentation next week? We've got Joe Hallett coming in next week, May 5th, May 4th. And so do you have anything that you'd like to add in there, Joe? You're muted right now, Joe. You're still muted. If you scroll around on your computer, middle of the screen, there's a little unmute yourself.
Come on, Joe.
There we go. No, actually, Paul, I'm going to contact you because I'm going to need to share the screen next week. I'm going to share a program that Brian Bailey and Mark Sweeney from Aimpoint have put together, and it's tremendous. It's statistics, but if you look at all the programs that are out there right now, some of them teach us how to play. This one is a great way of aligning play and practice. And some of the things that they pulled out are just, they're just mind blowing to see how players at great levels can, you would think, oh, there's no way, there's no way they're that bad at that part of the game. Well, you'd be surprised, but that might get back to an on-course lesson in course management. So Paul, you have to teach me how to tell the screen, but it's a really useful tool, and it's something that can kind of hold your students accountable. So it could be interesting.
Awesome. I look forward to your presentation next week, Joe. And thank you all again for joining us. I'll get in touch with you and we'll get something set up so we can go over everything, Joe. But thank you guys again for being here. We really appreciate everything that you guys are doing for our members across and just golf in general. We're just really appreciative of everything y'all are doing. And hopefully sounds like we're getting closer to being back to moving in the right direction. So hopefully that does follow through and we can get back out on the course on a more regular basis and keep moving forward. So thank you all again and have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you.